Tensions reached a peak in Washington, D.C. last fall as a result of frequent nuclear threats made by Moscow and discussions claimed by U.S. intelligence to have taken place among senior military officers in Russia regarding the use of such weapons. Although there are still worries about Russia launching a nuclear bomb, tensions have eased somewhat in recent days. According to the officials, several elements explain why. The battlefield has become calmer. China has issued cautions against the use of nuclear weapons. Contacts between Moscow and Washington have improved, and the International Atomic Energy Agency's involvement in Ukraine has expanded, all of which have led to an increased sense of stability in the region. A top official in the United States recently stated that Russian President Vladimir V. Putin may have realized that the threats, which he formerly perceived as a kind of leverage, are instead backfiring on him. The likelihood of a nuclear escalation continues to play a role in the decisions that the United States makes over the type of advanced weaponry to provide Ukraine. However, after nearly a year of fighting in the region, policymakers and intelligence analysts in the United States are more confident in their ability to comprehend at least some of Mr. Putin's red lines. They also have a better understanding of the types of support for Ukraine that will result in words of condemnation as opposed to the types of support that could risk something more deadly. It has been brought to the attention of officials working for the Biden administration that Russia's threats about nuclear escalation are not over, and that the next time the Kremlin wants to remind the West about the power of its arsenal, it may theoretically transfer a nuclear weapon that it knows can be watched by the United States. Officials in the Biden administration have cautioned that Russia's threats regarding nuclear escalation are not over. To disclose the ongoing negotiations, the officials from the United States talked on the condition of anonymity. The Pentagon is continuing to run hypothetical scenarios that simulate what would take place if Vladimir Putin deploys tactical weapons as a warning that he can back up his conventional forces. However, the overblown warnings aren't generating much of a stir because there isn't any other intelligence to back them up. The United States' reaction to a nuclear threat made by Dmitry Medvedev, a former president of Russia who currently serves as a deputy head of Russia's Security Council, was largely one of shrugging its shoulders last month. This week, in response to the decision made by Germany to supply Ukraine with tanks, Vladimir Putin issued a veiled threat to the European nation. He stated that they would not be bringing their tanks up to their borders. However, we do possess the resources necessary to mount a counterattack, and it will not be limited to the employment of armor. Everyone is responsible for comprehending this. In a speech given on Thursday in Washington, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, William J. Burns, stated that the United States of America had to take seriously the nuclear saber-rattling of Vladimir Putin and his advisors. In addition, Mr. Burns stated that he had made it very apparent to Russian authorities the severe repercussions that would result from the employment of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. It is a risk that we cannot afford to take lightly. On the other hand, the purpose of the saber-rattling is to intimidate us as well as our European allies and the Ukrainians themselves, he said. It is a risk that we cannot afford to take lightly. Therefore, I believe that we need to keep a level head in weighing those threats carefully while at the same time not allowing ourselves to be intimidated by them. In October, heightened nuclear fears emerged against the backdrop of a successful counteroffensive by the Ukrainian military. During this operation, the Ukrainian military recaptured a significant portion of terrain east of Kharkiv in the northeast. After that, it began an advance on Kherson, which is located in the south, which ultimately resulted in the Russian troops withdrawing from the city. A crude weapon that disperses radioactive material, but does not generate a nuclear reaction, is referred to as a dirty bomb. President Putin and other Russian authorities have cautioned against the use of such a bomb by the Ukrainian military, which is now in disarray. Officials from the United States were wondering what actions Moscow might take. The situation on the battlefield became more stable as winter set in and Russia was able to pull its men back from Kherson in a rather orderly manner. There is still heavy fighting going on in the Donbas region surrounding Bakhmut, but there have not been any significant territorial adjustments. They do not appear to be on the verge of a collapse that may make their leaders consider that the use of a tactical nuclear weapon is the only way to fend off defeat, as the Russians have dug in and strengthened their fortifications in the south. Officials from the United States credit, at the very least, an enhanced conversation with Moscow regarding nuclear matters. The United States intelligence community concluded, amid Russia's failures on the battlefield, that Russian military authorities had contemplated scenarios in which a tactical nuclear bomb could be utilized. Washington was left feeling uneasy as a result of two phone talks that took place between the Defense Secretary, Lloyd J. Austin, AE, and the Russian Defense Minister, Sergei K. Shoigu. During these calls, Mr. Shoigu expressed his concerns regarding Ukraine's likely use of a dirty bomb. However, several officials from the United States stated that Russian officials appeared to believe their deception, even though the statements were propaganda. bringing inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency into Ukraine, as well as the agency's discovery in early November that there was no evidence of a dirty bomb, helped alleviate tensions in the region. Tensions were also eased by a phone call that took place at the end of October between the chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark A. Milley, and his counterpart, General Valery V. Gerasimov, who is Russia's chief of the General Staff. According to two officials in the United States, General Gerasimov articulated the use of nuclear weapons during the call that was consistent with Washington's understanding of Russia's nuclear doctrine. This information was provided by General Gerasimov. In Turkey, Mr. Burns also had a meeting with his counterpart, Sergei Naryshkin, who is the director of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. The purpose of this meeting was to warn Russia about the dangers posed by its nuclear arsenal. According to statements made by Mr. Burns on Thursday, the objective of the trip was to make very clear the serious consequences of any use of tactical nuclear weapons. According to the officials, the meeting established a fresh channel of contact with the leadership of Russia. It has been suggested that President Biden is being unduly cautious about the delivery of aid to Ukraine. Nevertheless, officials from the United States have insisted that his top concern is preventing this situation from developing into a nuclear confrontation between Russia and the West. And even though American officials have a better idea of what activities may cause a reaction from the Russian government, it is difficult to predict what might provoke Mr. Putin. Many Americans are concerned about being drawn into the fight and becoming the target of nuclear attacks as a result of Russia's assault on Ukraine, according to a recent poll. This degree of concern is reminiscent of the Cold War era. According to a recent poll from the Associated Press and NORC Center for Public Affairs Research, over half of Americans say they are extremely afraid that Russia will directly target the U.S. with nuclear weapons, and an additional 3 in 10 say they are moderately concerned about it. Robin Thompson, a retired research scientist from Amherst, Massachusetts, said of the man, "He's out of control, and I don't think he has concern for much of anything but what he wants. And he is armed with nukes." 71% of Americans believe that the conflict has made it more likely that nuclear weapons will be used somewhere in the world. Soon after the attack on February 24th, Russian President Vladimir Putin put his nation's nuclear forces on high alert. Putin reminded the world in a speech on the day he began special operation that his nation is one of the most powerful nuclear states, which seemed to be a menacing threat. According to Tara Drozdenko, director of the Global Security Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists, anxiety is appropriate in that situation. There is always a chance of nuclear escalation when nuclear-armed states are going near a confrontation, she said. According to Drozdenko, NATO and the Biden administration have taken care thus far to avoid escalating the situation. Nearly half of Americans in a recent AP-NORC poll say they are extremely or very frightened that the U.S. would get involved in a conflict with Russia. Did you like it? Tell us what you think of the video in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting videos.